The war in Ukraine is raging on for close to 7 months now. Given the recent battlefield gains by Ukraine, the Russian troops on the ground are reportedly retreating. Now, the pressing question of the moment is, what would be the Russian President Vladimir Putin's next move? In recent weeks, it was widely reported that Ukraine has made significant regains in its northeast. It was also reported that the Russian forces retreated from several key areas. When the questions of the Russian retreat reached Vladimir Putin, this is what he said.
Корректировке не подлежит. Генеральный штаб.
The plan of Russia's special military operation is not subject to change. The General Staff makes operational decisions in the course of the operation. Something is considered the key, the main goal, and the main goal is the liberation of the entire territory of Donbass. This work continues despite attempts by the Ukrainian army to counter-offensive. Our offensive operation in the Donbass itself does not stop. It is moving at a slow pace, but consistently, gradually. The Russian army is occupying new and new territories.
Последовательно, постепенно, российская армия занимает новые и новые территории.
Speaking after the SCO summit in Uzbekistan, Samarkand, Putin added that Russian forces are not in a rush. It's also interesting that the Russian president had sought to test waters with his Asian allies. However, he got no tentative assurances during his meetings at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meet, which concluded on Friday. Both India and China have remained guarded. While Russia and China proclaimed a no-limits partnership, Beijing has now raised questions and concern over the conflict. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also told Putin at the same summit that today's era is not an era of war.
आज का युग युद्ध का है नहीं और हमने फोन पर भी कई बार आपसे इस विषय में बात की है कि डेमोक्रेसी और डिप्लोमेसी और डायलॉग ये सारी बातें ऐसी हैं कि जो दुनिया को एक स्पर्श करती हैं। आने वाले दिनों में शांति के रास्ते पर हम कैसे बढ़ सके उसके विषय में जरूर आज हमें चर्चा करने का मौका मिलेगा। आपका व्यू पॉइंट समझने का मुझे भी एक अवसर मिलेगा।
Meanwhile, Putin's statement regarding his plans in Ukraine immediately led to speculation. Taking together the Russian president's words and the situation on ground zero, Western analysts now believing the Russian forces are setting up a new defensive line in Ukraine's northeast. The British Defense Ministry saying the line is likely between the Oskil River and Svatov. The UK ministry added that maintaining control of this zone is crucial for Moscow. That's because the region is transited by one of the few main resupply routes that Russia still controls from its Belgorod region, adding that a stubborn defense of this area was likely. Earlier on Friday, the US military intelligence chief said Vladimir Putin is arriving at a decision. Stopping short of speculating over what that decision could be, the Pentagon's intelligence chief underlined that the Russian president's next move will largely drive how long this conflict lasts. And then there is also pressure from within. Some of the military operation's staunchest supporters are now calling on the Kremlin to scale things up in Ukraine. Hardline Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov lambasted the mistakes of the Russian generals. He made the comments in a voice note to his 2.4 million followers on Telegram, I beg your pardon. The opposition, though largely weakened, has doubled down on the criticism. And that's not all. Some local politicians from St. Petersburg, Moscow, and other regions have even called for the Russian leader to be sacked for the Ukraine invasion. In fact, some local representatives have also demanded charges of state treason against Putin and that he must be stripped of power. They have cited a series of reasons, including Russia's military losses in Ukraine and the damage to its economy from the Western sanctions, while posing no current threat to Putin's grip on power. The moves marking rare expressions of dissent by elected representatives. Considering the domestic and geopolitical compulsions, the Russian president now appears to be in a tight spot. And the big question still remains, what would be Putin's next move? And with me on the broadcast this minute is Edward P. Joseph, who is a foreign policy analyst and senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins University. Thanks very much, Edward, for being here. What do you make of the situation on the ground? Excuse me, also the setbacks, the diplomatic setbacks that Moscow has received at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in a way, with no assurances being given to him of support that he is seeking at this point, and the reaction that overall came in from the SCO over the Ukraine invasion?
I think we start with that, and I think you point that out quite clearly, that this is a political setback for Vladimir Putin. Here he is in this organization that by design is meant to stand against the Western powers, and he comes out of it with being reproached by both China and India. Xi Jinping reminding him that great powers have responsibilities. Clear signal to Vladimir Putin that China is not happy with this. There was absence of any support from China, and the open admonition, the criticism from Prime Minister Modi telling Vladimir Putin that this is not an era for war. So you have China and India who are both signaling their unhappiness with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and this crisis, this global crisis that Russia has created. And your viewers should know this is solely due to Russia's actions. This creation of a food crisis, energy prices, geopolitical instability, all due to Vladimir Putin's massive miscalculation. And in terms of his options, of course, we look at the battlefield, and then we look more widely at his other options. He has basically three avenues. The first is to stop the bleeding. That is to stop the halt the offensive that the Ukrainians have made, and to protect Russian gains, for example, even in Crimea. So there's signs that Russia has deployed troops to Crimea to protect territory that it seized, again, illegally, and annexed illegally back in 2014. So that's the first thing. He has to do that and halt the advance on the battlefield and draw a line. The second is what we already see from Russia. We know this from the tactics in the first place. There will be intensified attacks away from the battlefield on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and on Ukrainian civilians themselves. And the worry for all of us in India, in the United States, around the globe, for all of us, is those nuclear reactors, including Europe's largest nuclear power plant, and what Russia might do there to create, again, some kind of a crisis. So that would be second. And then third is he wants to play for time and stretch this out to the winter. And hopefully, in his eyes, he will hope for a cold winter and increasing the pain, the cost to the European consumers of Russian gas and their political leaders. So those are the three main elements for Vladimir Putin. We know, unfortunately, that there's not a fourth line, which would be the rational, normal line, which would be looking for a political solution, a negotiated solution. But unfortunately, Vladimir Putin has backed himself into a corner. He's staked his legacy and his power, his rule over essentially a criminal regime in Moscow. He staked it over this ill-advised and illegal invasion of Ukraine. Please.
Right, and just a few hours ago, President Biden also warning Vladimir Putin not to use nuclear weapons. Don't is what he said. But since you did touch upon that domestic pressure that Vladimir Putin is facing as well, the rare expression of dissent in Moscow, what do you make of that? And the statement, for example, coming in from the Chechen leader on his telegram.
The Chechen leader, Kadyrov, I don't put too much seriousness in. He's a Putin proxy. So, but more serious is the dissent and criticism within Russia, because we know that Vladimir Putin, being an autocrat, is afraid of criticism. And your viewers, those around the world watching, should know this is not a strong leader. This is a leader who's weak, who's afraid of his own people and afraid of criticism. And he completely dominates the media and has criminalized criticism, criminalized even calling this a war. And again, I come back to Prime Minister Modi's use of the word war, very significant and somewhat subtle, but that he publicly used the word, said this is not an era of war. In other words, dismissing immediately Vladimir Putin's fundamental claim that this isn't even a war. And he uses that term, false term, special military operation. So it is significant that with this complete intimidation of the population and criminalizing any signs of dissent that there is some in Russia, that is a signal. And what we know from that, if there is a public sign of dissent, here's what we can imagine. Behind the scenes, we can imagine power plays by various actors, various entities within various personalities, eager to advance themselves at the expense of others. In other words, pointing the finger and trying to undermine the effort and expose others to blame, hoping to advance themselves. Remember, it's a criminal regime. It operates. This is how the whole system operates, on your ability to steal. Vladimir Putin's giving you the ability to steal, and those who are ambitious and want to get in a position to steal more will try to undermine their colleagues, and that does not bode well for the Russian cause in Ukraine, the illegal Russian cause in Ukraine. Please.
Edward P. Joseph, thanks very much, as always, for being here.
You're welcome.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.